Amen. What's up, Revision? I'm excited to be here today. How about you? All right, that's mildly excited. I'm more excited than you. But I had an awesome moment this week where I discovered my personal superpower. And I'd never recognized it or seen it in that light before, but it was a revelation. Jenny and I took our kids to see Despicable Me 3. And without giving away any spoilers, I'll just let you know that there's a point in the movie where somebody asks Gru how he could possibly have gotten himself such a pretty wife since he doesn't have any hair. And right there in the middle of the theater, my 5-year-old daughter, Emma, yelled out, "My dad doesn't have any hair and he has a wife." And I realized marriage while bald is my superpower. It's not a very good one. And I had to explain to Emma later that I tricked Jenny into this whole thing while I still had hair. But I'll take it, and I'll take it because I don't have any other powers that I know of. We're in the middle of this series called Ordinary Heroes. And that kind of seems like an oxymoron, doesn't it? Like being one of those things pretty much rules out the possibility of being the other. You can't be ordinary and be a hero, right? And most of us, if we had to say which one of those two words best defines our lives, would not pick hero. I think a whole lot of us spend a whole lot of our lives believing that we have nothing of significance to offer the world. That heroism is beyond our reach. It's for somebody bigger and better and stronger and smarter and more talented. But what I want to do over the course of this series is we take a look at some ordinary men and women from the Bible who lived extraordinary stories, is help us see that being a hero doesn't mean you have to be better than you are. It doesn't even mean you have to think you're better than you are. Being a hero is about leveraging what you have for the sake of the people around you. Look, inside every soul, there is divine catalytic potential. There are all the necessary ingredients for a heroic life, for rewriting the future, if we are simply willing to give and to love and to serve for the needs and the brokenness that are right in front of our faces. I know that some of us hear that and we think, yeah, but not me. Not me. I don't have anything to give. And I can't serve in a way that's actually helpful because I don't have any abilities. I have a complete lack of skills. And I know for the last couple of weeks we talked about Jonah and Jonathan, but it turns out that's a prophet and a prince. And I assure you, I'm way more ordinary than those two guys. I got a lot less to offer than them. And also both their names start with J, and my name doesn't start with J. So Josh and John and Jesse, they might be on the hook, but I'm free. And we want to make a whole lot of excuses. It's easy for us to be so convinced of our own insignificance that we just kind of live into it. And every time there's a problem and somebody asks for volunteers, we just look the other way and try not to make eye contact, just like we did when we were in school. You guys know exactly what I'm talking about. Isn't that the worst when the teacher asks a question and you're just doing everything in your power to not get called on? Like, oh, please not me, please not me, please not me. And then usually you get saved by the class dork who's doing the exact opposite, like, right? This morning, I want to take a look at the idea that is who God is inviting us to be, with or without the sweater vest, okay? We're going to talk about maybe history's greatest Dorcas. Not so much a dweeb or a nerd, but just a real Dorcas. Some of you are chuckling. That's her name. That's rude. Someday in heaven, I'm going to rat you out. I'm going to be like, oh, Courtney laughed at your name. It's going to be very awkward for you. This is a human being, okay? We're going to read about the story of Dorcas in Acts. If you have your Bibles, you can open them up there. It's towards the end, sandwiched between John and Romans. It's a book written by a doctor named Luke that tells the story of the earliest days of Christianity and the earliest days of the church. And we're going to pick it up in chapter 9. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry about it. The words are going to be on the screen. If you don't own a Bible, or your kids don't, please take one from the Next Steps table on your way out. We'd love for you to have one. But we're introduced to Dorcas in Acts chapter 9, verse 36. It says this: in Joppa, there was a certain disciple named Tabitha. In Greek, her name is Dorcas. She was filled with good deeds and charity, which she constantly did. About that time, she became sick and died, and her body was washed and placed in an upstairs room. Lydda was near Joppa. So when the disciples heard that Peter was in Lydda, they sent 2 men to him and urged him, "Please come at once." Peter went with them, and when he arrived, he was taken upstairs to the room. All the widows stood around him crying and showing him the robes and other clothing that Dorcas had made while she was still with them. Peter sent them all out of the room. Then he got down on his knees and prayed. Turning toward the dead woman, he said, "Tabitha, get up." She opened her eyes, and seeing Peter, she sat up. He took her by the hand and helped her to her feet. Then he called for the believers, especially the widows, and presented her to them alive. This became known all over Joppa, and many people believed in the Lord. And right off the bat, we don't know a whole lot about Dorcas. The Bible doesn't talk about her in any other place, and this story doesn't give us a whole lot of details. But here's what we do know. She was so crazy awesome that when she died, a whole bunch of people gathered around and they looked at her lifeless body and said, "Nope, this is not going to work for us. Don't embalm her, don't bury her, just throw her upstairs. We're going to get Peter in here to see if he can work a miracle because no, she cannot be dead." And clearly she meant so much to so many people that Peter, who at this moment is leading the entire church movement in the world, this is the busiest season of his life, as soon as he hears that she's dead, decides he's going to immediately embark on a 12-mile journey, which was kind of a jaunt back in the day, to see if he can't muster up some sort of a miracle, even though raising people from the dead was not in his job description. He'd seen it done a couple times, but he had never done it. And you can just imagine him along this journey, like he hears that Dorcas died, and he's walking 12 miles thinking, "Oh God, please, bring her back. I've never done this before. I need a miracle. If you want me to keep pushing the church forward in the world, I do not want to have to do it without her. We need her. I need her. Bring her back." That's quite a legacy. Like that's quite an impact to have, quite a life to have lived. If you just heard that part, like if you heard that somebody had such an impact on so many people that when they died, everyone decided, we need a resurrection. Immediately you'd think that that person must have been a king or a queen or a mighty general or some great leader or great innovator who was completely irreplaceable. But Dorcas was none of those things. That's why I love this story. It's why she's one of my heroes. She was a totally ordinary person that did incredibly ordinary things. She just did them with extreme, extraordinary frequency and extraordinary love. She lived a lifestyle of giving whatever she had to meet the needs that were right in front of her, and it left a legacy. And that's the recipe for being an ordinary hero. Give what you have to meet the need in front of you, and you'll leave a legacy. I guarantee it. I want to dig into those 3 steps this morning, what it looks like to give what we have to the needs in front of us and leave a legacy. And given what you have, check it out. Verse 36 tells us that Dorcas was filled with good deeds and charity. And the word that we translate filled here is this Greek word that literally means like filled up to the complete top. Like where you couldn't add one more drop or it will overflow. There's no room for anything else. And Luke's telling us Dorcas lived a life where there was no room for anything else other than pouring herself out and showing love and giving what she had to the needs around her. She was so filled with good deeds and charity for the poor that she was doing them constantly. And what did she do? What did that look like? We don't know exactly. The only thing this story tells us is that she knit some clothes for widows. But here's what we know because of the way ancient literature was written. That's the most exciting thing she did. Okay? If she had done anything better, anything more interesting, anything bigger and greater and grander than knitting clothes for widows, Luke definitely would have put it in here to spice up this story. But he didn't, which means that Dorcas, this lady who died and everyone said, no, we cannot have her dead, she knit clothes for widows and some other nice stuff. And it changed the world and rewrote eternity for a whole bunch of people. That's nuts. It's crazy. If you guys are anything like me, you find yourself frequently hung up on your own lack of abilities and lack of resources. You just look out at all the needs around us, all the massive problems in the world, and feel like they're way too big for us to solve, and we can't possibly make a dent. But God has this crazy thing where he's not worried about our lack of abilities. And he's not worried about our lack of resources, and he is completely unconcerned with our opinion about whether or not we can make a difference. This one time, Jesus was teaching a crowd of thousands and thousands of people that were spread out all over a hillside. And 5,000 men, plus women, plus kids. And his disciples came to him and said, man, these people are hungry. What are we going to do? And Jesus looked at them and said, feed them. And the disciples freaked out. And they're like, how can we feed them? We don't have enough food. How? And Jesus asked them, what do you got in your hands? And they said, all we have are 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. And Jesus said, that'll do. Bring them to me. There's one time where Moses was out in the desert and he's tending his sheep and he looks off in the distance and he sees this bush that's on fire, but it's not burning. And so he goes over there and God speaks to him from the bush. He says, listen, I've heard the cries of my people who are oppressed and enslaved in Egypt. I'm going to need you to go to Pharaoh and set them free. And Moses freaked out and he's like, wow, Pharaoh's the most powerful man in the world. How in the world can I go to Pharaoh? What do I have to bring? And God said, I don't know, what do you got in your hand? And Moses said, a stick. All the shepherds have them. We use it to hit the sheep or something. I don't know, I'm not a shepherd, right? But what I do know is that God responded to that by saying, a stick, that's perfect. You're going to want to bring that when you meet Pharaoh, okay? We get so hung up on asking, how much is it going to take? But God keeps asking, what do you have in your hands? I came across a poem while I was studying this week. I loved it. It said, Noah had a hammer and David had a sling. Samson had a jawbone and Rahab had a string. Joshua had a sword. Aaron had a rod. Dorcas had a needle. All were used by God. This is a lady who met Jesus and she realized, oh man, I can't do much, but I gotta do something. I can knit. Here goes. We said last week, I want to say it again this week, doing something right is better and more important than doing nothing wrong. Dorcas looked at the incredible need in front of her in the world, at the incredible need in front of her in Joppa, and all she had was a needle and thread, so that's all she brought. It's what she had in her hands. What do you have in your hands? About 5 years ago, I took a group of college students to Haiti. And a few months before we were going to go down there, the missionary that we were supposed to work with emailed me like a questionnaire about our skills and abilities, and it had a whole list on there ranging from like construction to medical care. And I choked. I choked because I read through all the boxes and we couldn't check any of them with honesty. And so I emailed her back and I said, listen, I gotta be straight with you. We don't have any of those skills. We can't check any of those boxes. And if there's no way for us to serve, there'll be no hard feelings. We just won't come. We don't want to be a pain in your side. Honestly, our only skill is hanging out. I told her, like, just let me know. But the only thing we're good at is hanging out, and we would need some serious supervision to do any of those other things. And she got back to me. She said, look, if you're serious and your skill really is hanging out, there's an orphanage. I don't take people there anymore. Not very often, at least, because I've taken people there in the past, and it's dirty, and it's gross, and it's heartbreaking. And the kids are clingy, and they have no sense of personal space. And I've taken people there and watched them get so uncomfortable, and the kids see it, and they feel it, and it rips my heart out. I won't do that to the kids. But if you're serious, we can go hang out there. And it was awesome. And it was heartbreaking, and it was dirty. There was a little girl who wanted a shoulder rod, and I put her up there and realized she had recently peed. So it was all over my neck and my back, and that was right after we got there. And those are moments that you never forget. But I saw this missionary a couple years ago. It was more than 3 years after that trip, and she came up to me. She's like, hey, Mike, I was at the orphanage a couple weeks ago. They still talk about you guys. They were telling me how they know they don't have to be afraid when the bad men bang on the door at night trying to get in because God is with them, because you guys taught them that God's with them just like he was with David when he had to fight Goliath. And they still sing the stupid, annoying songs that you taught them too. I was blown away, because I had this moment where I realized I still think about them too. I remember their names and their faces, and I thought, what if we had lied and checked one of the boxes and pretended we were something that we weren't? Like, I have no doubt that if we had tried to build something in Haiti, it would not have still been standing 3 years after we left. No way. Or what if we decided not to go? What if we looked at the box and said, well, we don't have any skills, we don't have any abilities, we can't serve there, we can't go. But somebody asked us, what's in your hands? And we said, nothing. We just like to chill with people. And somehow, some way, God said, that's perfect. Watch what I can do with that. Sometimes we think solving problems is for the professionals. But God seems to think it's for whoever is present. Like whoever is just willing to show up. We want to leave it up to the experts, but God keeps calling the neighbors. I want you to understand, in God's economy, neighbor trumps professional every single time. And you guys, like, if there's going to be times if you walk this path toward ordinary heroism. Like if you keep charging, if we keep charging toward massive problems only with what we have in our hands, hoping that a miracle occurs, there are going to be times along the journey where you stop and think, really? This is the strategy? Like God spoke the earth into being, and this is his plan. He wants to use my trivial abilities and meager resources. He doesn't have a better plan. This is it. And I want you to know that God is looking on saying, yes, this is the strategy. This has always been the strategy. You think you're ordinary? I made you to be a hero. Just bring me what you've got and watch what I can do with it. Watch what I can do. Bring me what you got. Bring me what I gave you, with the knowledge that when I touch it, miraculous things happen. Just give what you have. And give it to meet the needs that are right in front of you. God wants to use you for that purpose. It's why you are where you are. And no, it's not just that God wants to use like the gifts that he's given you in spite of you. He wants you. He invites you to participate in what he's doing. And we take that invitation and put it in the drawer. So often we want to wait for superheroes, or we want to pretend to be them. We want to dress up in costumes and capes and put on masks. Or we want to wait for the right moment when it's more perfect. When we got the education, when we finally got the degree. When the situation feels a little bit better, when our 401k and our savings account is built up enough, then we want to wait till we're in, the perfect job. Good luck with that. Or we found the perfect marriage. Good luck with that. Or we're in the perfect church. Good luck with that. Okay, and then I'll do something for God. But there are people who are hurting and broken in this moment, so God doesn't have time to traffic in our thens. And sometimes, let's be honest, we know that, but the needs that we see are not the needs that we want to meet. They're not very sexy. Like, and going out of our way and giving of ourselves to do something about those needs that are right in front of us, it wouldn't make a very good profile picture on social media, like #humanitarian, serving, hero, right? And so we don't want to do them. We want to wait for like the big needs where we can really change the world. And so we make excuses to just sit it out until we can do something that's really important. But check out Jesus' first miracle. The first miracle that Jesus ever did not change the world. It didn't feed the hungry. It didn't clothe the naked. It didn't free the oppressed. It didn't end a war. It didn't overthrow an oppressive kingdom or set a nation free. He was at a wedding and they ran out of wine, and his mom said, "Come on, please make some more." This is the first miracle Jesus did in the world. And what Jesus did was he said, "All right, fine, Mom," because moms are like that. And he told some people, "Hey, if you guys go fill up these barrels with water and bring them back to me, I'll turn that water into wine." I don't know about you guys, but every time I read that story, I think to myself, I can't help but think like, why did they have to go fill up the barrels? Like if Jesus could turn water into wine and make the whole earth, couldn't he have just made empty barrels full of wine? Wouldn't that have been a cooler miracle? But instead he made these poor suckers like lug giant barrels full of water over to him. Is he just being a jerk and entertaining himself? This is what I see when I read the story. But I can't help but think, again, it's on purpose. He's showing us, again, God is asking us to bring what we can and what we have. Those people couldn't make wine, but they could go get water. He said, "Hey, bring me what you got. Bring me what you can, because when I touch it, miracles happen." I'm going to look at Dorcas. I want to point out two things about the way that she did this morning, the way that she just gave what she had in a way that met the needs right in front of her. And the first one is this: she did it for everybody, not just the people who were clean, not just the people who looked like her, and not just the people that were easy to love. And we know that from the way Luke tells the story. Like at first glance, it may have seemed weird to you that he gives her two names, Tabitha, which is Aramaic, and Dorcas, which is Greek. Because if you read the rest of Acts, he doesn't give everybody else's name in two different languages. All right? So why hers? Well, here's why, because everybody knew her, like the entire town of Joppa. She walked around, and the Jews knew her as Tabby, and the Greeks knew her as Dorky, and it's a great name, okay? But check it out. At this point in time, the Jews and the Greeks, the Gentiles, they didn't do a whole lot of associating with one another. The Jews thought they were unclean and dirty, and even inside the church. Like Jesus ascended back into heaven, and almost immediately his church kind of separated. And the Jews inside the church kept those dirty Gentiles at an arm's length, like, oh, I don't know about them. And this is where we are in the story of the history of the world. Right before this, like at the very beginning of Acts chapter 9, Paul had his Damascus Road encounter with Jesus, where Jesus showed up and knocked him off his horse and said, listen, I got a plan for you to take this message, this good news of the gospel, to the whole world. And right after it, at the beginning of chapter 10, Peter has a vision where God just slaps him across the face with the fact that like, Jesus was for everybody, man. Figure it out. And right in the middle of these two earth-shaking, history-shaping revelations, where God had to literally stop the men dead in their tracks and audibly speak to them to get it through their skulls that Jesus came and died for every person on this planet, right in the middle of them is this lady who figured that out because she knew Jesus, who lived it out and led and said, no, look, I met Jesus, and because I met Jesus, I'm looking at a whole bunch of people, and if I can see him, he loves them. So she crossed racial boundaries, and she crossed socioeconomic boundaries before Peter was willing to do it, before Paul was willing to do it, because she wanted to live like Jesus, and she saw a whole bunch of people that he loved, and that's why she has two names in this story. And how'd she do it? Again, we don't know exactly. Clearly, she showed love in any way that she could. But specifically, and we're going to have a raw Bible moment, she showed the love of Jesus to everybody around her by being a first century version of Victoria's Secret, okay? Now, sometimes our English Bibles, they kind of sand down the rough edges to make it nice and presentable. But in verse 39, it says, all the widows stood around Peter crying and showing him the robes and other clothing Dorcas had made while she was still with them. Okay, this word for robes is kitan. It means negligee, okay? It's like they wore underwear differently than we do, but it's the layer that went between your skin and your clothes. And like Dorcas said, how can I serve? How can I show the love of Jesus? Someone said the widows need undies, and so she started knitting. Like that's what happened. That's who this lady was, and consequently, I don't know this for sure, but I think that's why Peter kicked everyone out before he raised her back. Because he walked in, and all the widows are like, look, and he's like, I'm trying to do a miracle here, get these grandma underwears out of my face. And then he raised her from the dead, okay? Listen, she's an underwear maker. Imagine how easy it would have been for her to decide, what can I do? I'm just a little old lady with history's least fortunate name. And an awkward skill set. How in the world could I do any good for God's kingdom? But she brought what she had. She brought the best of herself to God. And you know what happened? God took that and he said, boom. And it changed the city, and it changed the church, and it brought about human flourishing, and it introduced people to Jesus and rewrote eternity, and there's no way she saw that coming. There's no way she thought she was going to change the world. There's no way she thought 2,000 years later we would remember her name and her story and be talking about her. All she knew was that God's love through her could rewrite the eternity of the people she was meeting. And so she came with open hands and gave all of herself, the best of herself, to that purpose. I mean, what a legacy. What an incredible story that we're still telling thousands of years later about this heroic woman. You guys, here's what happens when we live like Dorcas. When we're willing to live for something and someone bigger than ourselves. When we leverage what we have for the sake of the people around us. When we come to God just willing to let him pour us out. When we do that, people crash into our lives and they meet Jesus in the collision. And it may not radically change the future of the entire planet, but it radically alters the future of those people who met Jesus. And that, any way you paint it, is a heroic legacy. I know I know the idea of coming to God like that, with open hands, just trusting that He'll touch whatever we bring and make something extraordinary out of our ordinary resources and our ordinary skills. I know the idea of sacrificing, of leveraging yourself for the sake of others is kind of scary. There's something inside of us that wants to put a hand up and say, "No, I can't do that. I cannot do that." And maybe you're sitting here right now thinking, "Man, that was a cool lady. What a great story, but I'm not her. I couldn't do it. I ain't not a Dorcas." Okay? And what I want you to know is that Principal Seymour Skinner feels your pain, but he's wrong. He is a Dorcas, and so are you. You're wrong if you think that. Inside your soul, there is divine catalytic potential. There are all the necessary ingredients for being a hero and for rewriting the people your life, or rewriting the future for the people your life crashes into every day if you're just willing to come to God empty-handed with what little you have and let Him use you. And you can do it no matter who you are. And you can do it no matter where you've been, and you can do it no matter where you're at along your faith journey. So my challenge to all of us today, to all of us this morning, is to be a Dorcas, okay? Let's get this hashtag trending. We may not be able to do it worldwide, but we could do it in Windsor Heights. There's only 5,000 people that live here, right? Be a Dorcas. And how do you do it? What do you got in your hands? What do you have in your hands? There are all kinds of needs, and some are easier than others, and some are cleaner than others, but they're all around us. One way to be a Dorcas is to come in 2 weeks and be at Reach Des Moines. Some of you guys, Reach Des Moines is like your favorite Sunday at Revision, and some of you, it's your least favorite Sunday. You're like, that's just not me. And some of you are here for like the first or second time. You have no idea what I'm talking about. But in 2 weeks, we're going to cancel our services. We do it every time there's 5 Sundays in a month. And we're going to spread out around the metro and serve with organizations that are doing great things to help this city and its people flourish. Because we want to show the love of Jesus to the people our lives crash into every day. And we're under no delusions that people across the globe are going to wake up on the 31st and see a world that's different because we served on the 30th. But I passionately believe that when people meet Jesus, their hearts change. And so we're willing to go anywhere and do anything to help them meet Him and know His love. Look, and again, this month we're going to go to some places that are dirty and that are difficult and that are gross. And we're going to go to some people that our lives might not otherwise intersect with. We're going to go clean up a homeless camp. That's not a place where a whole lot of people love to go. Not a whole lot of people are excited to walk into that level of filth. But my dream and my hope is that we will always be a community that's willing to go to the places where no one else will go and willing to do the things that no one else will do, because the love, like the outrageous, crazy love that Jesus showed us, and our big faith that if we bring Him what we have, He'll touch it and make something miraculous out of it, just propels us forward. So how can you be a Dorcas? Go sign up. You want to be a huge Dorcas? Invite someone to come with you, okay? And ask God this week just to open up your eyes, to help you see the brokenness and the pain that's right in front of you, to help you see how you can bless the people around you. It's not easy. It's easy to keep on living for ourselves. It's easy to keep on believing that we have nothing to offer, to keep on believing that we're too ordinary to make a difference. But you guys, I'm convinced. I just believe that our God is still the God who hears the cries of the oppressed in the world. That He sees their tears in the night, that His heart breaks over their brokenness and their need, and He's just looking for some people, some ordinary people like you and me and Dorcas, who will unleash the hero that He placed inside their souls by leveraging themselves for the sake of the world. Will you pray with me? Heavenly Father, thank you for inviting us along on this journey. Thank you for the way in which you use people who feel useless and helpless and hopeless. Ordinary people like us, like Dorcas. God, I just pray that you'd move in our hearts now. That you give us a vision for how we can leverage ourselves. We can leverage our meager abilities and resources for the sake of the people around us. God, we trust that as we do it with Reach Des Moines in a couple weeks, as we do it this week, as we do it with our lives, as we walk out and come to you with open hands, allowing you to pour us out, God, we just trust that when we bring you what we got, you'll touch it, and you will work miracles in this place that rewrite the eternity for the people in our city. We don't have much, God, but inspire us and walk with us as we leverage every bit of it for the sake of this city. In Jesus' name, amen.